have to sit. So you need to make room for everybody, okay? So get comfy, and unfortunately, it's first come, first serve. You can't save spots. Please go here, which how I get them in here, and then you can come back out. Okay? Thank you. And no gum. No gum. And it doesn't use texture right here. Please keep your comments down. I know that some of you are talking in here. It's hard enough to hear the attorneys. We just let everything out. You guys. So please, no talking. If you need to talk or whatever, please go outside.
Bring the jury in. Counsel, you have any idea how much more you have?
I told Mr. Allen it was probably a safe guess he'd be starting this afternoon, assuming the court wouldn't want him to start at 11:45. Quarter to 12. I don't know exactly, but
Okay.
I'd rather do that, Your Honor.
That's the reason I asked.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Please rise to the jury.
Please be seated.
Ms. Carlstrom, can I get my water? Okay, so we've talked about the fact that we know she was killed in the house, but let's look at some of the things outside the house that help us to know that as well. From that dark, trashy end of a cul-de-sac at the end of the road that became a temporary cemetery for her, the woman who made the mistake of marrying the wrong person. Nikki was naked. If some robber or serial killer or drug dealer killed her, where are her clothes? If some robber or serial killer or drug dealer killed her, why does she still have her silver necklace on? If some robber or serial killer or drug dealer killed her, why did he leave that expensive sports equipment in her car? Why didn't he rape her? We'll talk about that in a minute. And why, oh why, would he carry her into the woods and lay her under blackberry bushes, oh so carefully? There she is. hidden enough. Not dumped on top, not tossed from a car, not splayed around with her feet and arms and legs in all directions like discarded trash. Carefully pushed in to those blackberry bushes. You remember the scratches that the medical examiner talked about that were bloodless, that were probably from the sticker thorns on the bushes. If you look at where the scratches are on her body, push, 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 adjust, swing the butt in, right? Why would a serial killer or a robber or a drug dealer bother to do that? She instead was in an almost heartbreaking position of someone who was put there by someone who knew her and probably at one time cared about her, maybe back at some point. And her feet, the waterlogged feet, so clean. She didn't walk in there. She was carried. Maybe he had to search a little bit for the right spot. Remember that sort of odd mud that they talked about on her shoulders? Well, he's carrying dead weight, literally. And she may only be 125 pounds, but she was 125 pounds. And if you're searching around for a place to put someone and you've come to the end of a cul-de-sac and you see various roads or treed areas or whatever, maybe put her down as he was looking for a spot, dropped her. Bill Schneck said soil can vary from 1 foot to another. It can be that different because it's so diverse. Did he take her down the dirt road that led to that construction site, see the equipment, get freaked out, come back? That dirt road that had turned to mud, did he take her to the mobile home park thinking, oh, maybe it's occupied? Who knows? That's another question we're never going to know the answer to. All we know is that she was dead weight until the perfect spot became available. And yes, as the defendant volunteered in his statement to police and other people, much like the pills, there was one other thing that was missing, and that was her retainer. There's no question it made her list. There's no question she didn't wear it out. Remember the joke she made to Geraldine about if she were to train with it in her mouth, he would talk like that? She didn't wear this out of the house. It was in her mouth because she had gone to bed when the defendant came home and killed her and carried her naked out of the house and took her in whatever manner, a green bag, who knows, and drove around to Burien and put her body in the bushes. This is a little thing that is huge. Huge. Only the defendant, in his self-serving way, says that she ever wore it out of the house, and he said she sometimes wore it to the store. And he's claiming that she wore it out to go pick up a drug dealer, or to go to her AA birthday where she was kidnapped or whatever happened. And naked, apparently. In his haste to cover her up, because he had so little time to get her disposed of and get to work on time, he forgot about that retainer. He probably didn't even realize it was in her mouth. Just like the acetol pills that he couldn't have known about, and the Mexican food that he couldn't have known about. And that is to his detriment, because now a jury of 12 people know about it. The cover-up was clumsy. It's essentially a staged death, but it was hastily done by necessity. He had to get to work by 9 a.m. He had to appear normal. Then, when her body was found, or even when she disappeared, he had to appear worried. Well, he didn't do a very good job of that, because he wasn't worried, because he knew she wasn't missing, she was dead. He couldn't quite pull it off, because he couldn't fake caring about her, or what happened to her. Do you remember the 911 calls that he made to Snohomish County? Listen again, they're brief, and decide if it sounds like a husband who's actually worried about the safety and health of his missing wife.
One was the emergency?
I think I might have the two persons.
Okay, what address is the person looking for?
15415. 35th Avenue West. Unit C106.
How long has they been missing?
Well, the last time I spoke to her was actually last night around midnight when I got home.
How old is she?
32.
Does she have any medical problems that's putting her life in immediate danger?
No.
Okay, what's your name?
My name is Martin Pietz.
How do you spell last name?
Pietz.
And your phone number?
206
Uh-huh.
369 6034.
Okay, I'll just have a deputy out there to assist you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, bye-bye. 911, what's your emergency?
I need to report somebody missing.
Okay, and the address for missing from?
15415.
What is it?
15415.
Uh-huh.
35th Avenue West.
Okay, house or apartment?
Condo.
What unit number?
C106.
C like Charles 106? Is that right? C like Charles? Are you there? Yes, C like Charles 106?
Yes.
Okay, what's your last name?
Pietz.
And your first name?
Martin. Martin.
What's your callback number?
206 369 6034.
Okay, and who's missing?
Nicole Pietz, my wife.
Okay. How long has she been gone?
About the last time I talked to her was when we went to bed Friday night at midnight.
Okay.
When I noticed that she wasn't where she was supposed to be, was we supposed to have dinner 6 o'clock with some friends.
Okay. And you have no idea where she is? All right, we'll have an officer contact you.
Okay.
And you're there at the condos?
Yes.
Okay, thanks, bye.
Okay, at that point, she's been missing a day and a half. Your wife has been missing a day and a half, and that's what you sound like when you call the police. And when her friends are frantically calling and calling and calling her, Nikki, where are you? Are you hurt? Have you relapsed like David said? This will not be going back with you, so I ask you to take a good look at it if you haven't already. Note the date, 1/28. That Saturday. The last time he leaves her a voicemail is at 5:17 p.m. And the last time he dials her number is at 10:15 p.m. and he never dials it again.
Hey, what? Hey, honestly, she's trying to get a hold of you too. I just called to see if you're over there. So, check your phone on. Give me a call. Because I thought you were going over there. I thought you were going to be there like around 5, and I was going to be there at 6. I got off a little early. So I got the overtime. So, give me a call or call Ellen. We don't even know what we're doing for dinner. I love you. Bye.
And he doesn't search for her. And he doesn't put flyers up for her. All he did, from what we heard, was put maps on a memory stick to give to other people who did want to search for her. Why would he search? He knew where she was. And he didn't care if she was found. And he is not good at pretending like he cared. Remember the weird sort of way that he called people at the beginning? Where a typical person might call and say, hey, is Nikki with you? Have you seen her? Because I haven't heard from her all day, or in a day and a half. Any idea where she might be? Instead, he calls Nikki's sister, and his first words are, Nikki is missing. And Tanya gives him a list of places to call that only a husband can get information from, hospitals, things like that. And she calls back a half hour later to see what he's learned, and he is asleep. He doesn't care. And he has no reason to call the hospitals because he knows where she is. He calls her parents, and his first words to Rod are, Nikki is missing. And Rod and Gail are the ones who fly to Seattle and go door to door in that condo complex, not him. And drive the route to the AA meeting, not him. And drive to every parking lot around Green Lake, not him. He sends them there. And drive to every Starbucks and coffee shop in the South End, looking in the parking lots, not him. And while the defendant did nothing, he didn't bother to pass along Tamara's offer of a helicopter to look for Nikki. Well, he did do something. When Tamara came by to see what she could do to help, he installed a sound system. That's what he was doing when she came. And Tamara said he was mellow, casual, and had no stress. He never asked for help from Mike Piquel, the handyman at the condo complex, even though he's the one guy who had access to the entire complex. And he simply lied. He sent Detective Pietz and Detective Pietz and Rod on a wild goose chase, telling them, oh my goodness, I just got information that her bank card was used on the 30th, which would be that Monday, right? And all the while, it had just been a delayed posting from the 26th, the day before she died, and it was a posting of a purchase the defendant made at a Chevron station in Kent. And he never bothered to tell Detective Pietz that. He only admitted it when Jesse Anderson from King County said, we have a receipt showing that you were at IKEA in Kent on the 26th. Oh yeah, I gassed up at the Chevron. And he never called her, never left another voicemail, but other people did 37 times only in 4 days, up to the 31st, 37 calls and voicemails.
Naked camera, I just got an email from Steve about you not being home all day. Call me.
Hey, Nikki, it's Barbara. I'm just hoping that you're doing okay. I've been thinking about you a lot, all day, 24/7. I just wanted to know if maybe your cell phone is not charged. I don't even know if you have your charger with you, but if you hear this message, please give me a call. I miss you so much, and I love you. And your family is just so worried about you. That includes Benson Hill. So if you give me a call, I hope you can, and that you're not hurting anyway. So I will talk to you later, hopefully, or I'll see you soon. I hope. I love you, hon. Bye.
Why isn't that her husband? Call me, Nikki. Why is he not calling her over and over and over, starting out frustrated? Where the heck are you? Why are you not calling me back? Turning to anger, Nikki, call me back. This is getting annoying. Then concerned, are you okay? You need to call me if there's a problem. Then frightened, I'm really scared, honey, where are you? Then tearful. All focused on concern for her and focused on the fact that she has disappeared. And why did he not do that? Why? Because he knew she was dead. There was no point. And he didn't think about what he needed to do to create a better story because he did not care. And at that point, he did not think she was going to be found. He was done. And as he told Troy, I can start dating again. There's no evidence of any compassion or care for her because he had none. And in trying to explain what happened that morning when Nikki was strangled to death, he incriminated himself without even realizing it. Because he didn't know there were little things, all these little things, that 6 years later would become part of the bigger picture of what happened. You know, Mark Twain said it's easier to tell the truth than a lie because there's less to remember. That makes a lot of sense. The defendant couldn't stay consistent. He couldn't remember what he told various people about coming home that night. A fairly important moment in one's life, you would think, if your wife disappeared as a result. To Barbara, I went in to say hi to Nikki because she always waited up for me. I ate something, went to bed, and then she was asleep. To Officer Finsky, Nikki was already asleep when I got home. To Rod, Nikki was not sleeping. We had some sort of exchange, and then the next morning she was gone. To Gail and Tamara, I came home, Nikki woke up, asked if I wanted anything to eat, and then she went back to sleep. To Ashley, I went home that night and Nikki wasn't there. I went to bed thinking I'll deal with it in the morning. And to the King County detectives, as you just heard, I went home, Nikki was asleep, me coming home woke her up, she said a couple words, and went back to sleep. He can't keep it straight in his head because he's not telling the truth. Other lies. To Ashley, Nikki had relapsed and I was nursing her back to sobriety. Google it, he said, and you'll find out she was an alcoholic. To Carla, overheard by Ian, I check with the police every anniversary of Nikki's death to see what the status of the investigation is, to see if I can help in any way. That's particularly interesting, apart from the fact that there's been no contact with him since February of 2006, given that when Detective Pavlovich approached him last year, saying he had great news about his murdered wife's case, the unsolved homicide that had been festering for 6 years, and the defendant said, I need to open my bank branch. And then there's the physical evidence he couldn't have known and didn't think about was going to matter. We know both he and Nikki drove the Jetta. There's no question about that. But Kim Duddy from the crime lab, you remember? said it appeared to her the seat was pushed back too far for a 5'4" woman to drive. His DNA alone on the gear shift in crucial places. On the smooth surface, the button, Mr. Curry testified that the smoothness of a surface can be an important factor on whether you find touch DNA, because it typically means you have to have put the DNA on it longer, held it longer. And underneath the gear shift, like so. As he is changing the gears of the car. Mr. Curry said the last person to touch something could overwhelm the first person that touched something. So there's more DNA than the first person who touched something. In this, we have the defendant's DNA only. His fingerprint on the inside of the driver's door handle, the handle he used to get out of the car that night, clearly. No DNA from anyone else except Nikki and him. And a partial fingerprint that you had to sit through 4 experts to learn about. It's basically inconclusive, with one saying, in 2006 I excluded him. But all of them agreed that what was there was consistent with his right thumb on the knob of the gear shift. And remember, his DNA was mixed with Nikki's on the wiper knob, and it had been pouring rain, as we know, and Detective McNabb testified that when he turned the car on for the first time, the wipers were on. And no fingerprints from Nikki in the driver's area. He was the last one to drive that car. And the words that he said, not knowing that they would matter today. Things that leak out because he didn't know they would matter. They matter to people that have feelings and empathy. But he is not that person, and he can't pretend very well. To Gail at the funeral, I didn't think you'd take it so hard. That's probably true. He was surprised that anyone could care so much about anyone, especially Nikki. To Geraldine at the funeral, thanks for the condolences. What about the insurance? To Amber at the bank, yes, my ex-wife was murdered. I'm over it. Other things that leak out. Remember when detectives told the defendant they had found Nikki's body? And his first question to them, was she raped? It's an interesting first question. Especially when you consider his response when they asked what she was wearing when she left the condo. And his response was, I don't know, are you implying she was naked? Why would he think that? And making reference to it in his taped statement when the detectives asked him about sex and digital penetration, meaning penetration with the finger. And he said, did you find something? And when you consider what he told Rod and Gail as he was looking through Nicole's pile of clothes on the floor, a truly bizarre statement. What could she have been wearing? Everything she owns looks like it's right here. So he's saying she was naked? Really? It's chilling to think about. But doesn't it make sense to you that rather than actually knowing every item of clothing that Nikki owned, rather than immediately being worried about a rape, rather than first asking, where did you find her? What happened to her? How did she die? Was she shot? Was she stabbed? Was she beaten? Do you know who did it? His first question, was she raped? He's asking that question because he hoped his setup would make it look that way. That made all the logical sense in the world. He knew she was naked when he killed her, and he had to come up with a scenario short of redressing her, which is difficult on a dead body, that worked with that fact that she was nude. Doesn't it make sense that he violated her vagina with enough force to cause that little tear inside and make it look like she was raped, and then bring it up over and over again to see if it had been bought as a theory of what happened? So he could ask, was she raped? And maybe the answer would be yes. Well, she has a little damage inside. Or possibly. And the focus would move off him. There's one little thing he hadn't thought of. There was no semen. There was no sperm. There was no other injury to the vaginal or anal area. There was no rape. The biggest mistake in his cover-up is that ill-advised call to the gym, from the gym, on her phone. When Detective asked him when Nikki last called him, he said it his answer was very interesting. He said, there was a call from her phone at 11:50. Not, Nikki called me. There was a call from her phone at 11:50. Interesting way to put it. Again, it's leaking out. The call was from her phone, but it was not from her. The cell tower that the call at 11:50 hit on is the one closest to the gym. Just like every other call he made on his cell phone in the entire month of January when he was at the gym, hit off that tower. All 63 calls to and from his cell phone during January of 2006, during his work hours when he would have been at the gym, presumably, hit off the same tower as the one call supposedly from Nicole at 11:50. Except for 9. And of those 9 calls that didn't hit off that tower while he was on work hours, 1 was over the lunch hour. 2, he had just checked out of the garage. 3, he was near his home in Linwood. It hit off the tower there. Or 4, he was traveling south to Auburn on the afternoon of January 20th, a week before her death. That cell tower was working just fine. Remember the repair ticket discussed at length with Ashwani from AT&T by the defense was not for the day in question. It was not for the 28th. And even then, engineers found nothing. They came out and checked. There's nothing wrong with that tower. It was working fine when the defendant made his calls all through January. And it was working fine when the defendant left the front desk at the gym. You saw the video. At just the right time, right before that call came in, headed in the direction of Shannon Monahan's office, which only he had access to on the weekends, and a place where he could make that call in privacy, a call that was supposedly coming from Nikki, and then return to the desk within minutes of that. Very perfect timing. And as the video showed, the receptionist, Christina, appears to pick up the phone at just the right time, that 11:50 time. It's very difficult to see on the video, but you can tell because of the sort of the glow off the handset and what she said when she testified. Then a customer arrives, right? She believes she put the phone down or on hold. And then she picks it back up on the video, and then she hangs up. And it takes exactly 21 seconds on the video for that to happen. "21 seconds. And it makes complete sense if the caller, the defendant, didn't talk, because she would know his voice, and it especially makes sense if she didn't page anyone, because she didn't have time to do it. She was dealing with a customer, she put the phone down, she put it on hold, she picks it back up, and he hangs up on her. Very simple way of accomplishing this. She didn't then, and doesn't now, remember Nikki calling her on that day. And she knew Nikki because Nikki called the gym a lot. And remember, Rod and Gail begged the defendant to get in touch with the receptionist at the gym to see if she remembered anything from that day. They didn't know anything. And every time he would retreat to the second bedroom in his house, in his condo, for a few minutes and come out and say, I couldn't reach her, or she was at lunch, or she's not there today. Again, the problem of keeping straight what you've told people about that call to Rod. I was in the equipment room, I didn't hear the page. No indication he was paged. To Tamara, she said he knew exactly where he was in the pool area, and there's no intercom down there. Troy says that's actually not true. To Detective Pietz, Nikki left me a message in that call. To Derek, whose reaction was there are too many details in this statement by the defendant. He was in the boiler room and couldn't hear the page. Not the equipment room. And an employee told him that he missed the page. And what employee would that be? And in his statement to King County detectives, I was on my break and I was cleaning up someone having thrown up. The problem with that is mops aren't kept in the boiler room and they're not kept in the pool area. So which is it? Here's the reality. He left that desk, he made that call, and he came back. And he left another little thing behind. And we'll see it. Remember when he went to Safeway the night, on the way home, Friday night, the night Dickie probably was killed, to buy liquor to bring home to a wife that was sober, or that he could drink even though she didn't like liquor on his breath? And you remember the video of him entering the Safeway. Whoops.
Was there?
Okay. You see him in his red 24-hour shirt, and you see something else, his name tag, right? Everyone had to wear one, even if it was with a fake name. If they lost theirs, they had to put a strip over it. And we heard testimony that he was particularly obsessive about everybody wearing their name tags. So he has on his name tag. The next morning, he told detectives he overslept and was in such a rush, he just put on the same clothes he had worn before. That meaning he had put on the clothes Saturday that he had worn on Friday because he overslept, when we know it was because he was out dumping her body.
Was there anything that you got walking around the house that made you concerned? No. I didn't know, but I didn't go to work. I mean, I literally, I wore, I think I put on the same shirt and pants that I had taken off the night before because I was so late. And the dog was whining and he doesn't whine. And so I took him out and he pooped. And he never just pooped right away. I was taking 20 minutes to poop, so he pooped right away. So he had to go to the gun, probably, you know, put it back in his crate, and I grabbed a bagel and I left it.
No. Here's what really happened. It's Friday, the 27th. Nicole has been crying at work, and she tells Tony Twitchell, I know David is having an affair. Tony described her as furious, upset, and dumbfounded. So she's headed home right after that, after buying her Mexican dinner, to deal with that reality. The defendant, meanwhile, he'd started doing interviews for promotions as soon as he got to the Seattle club on January 1st, which was 26 days before, according to Shannon Monahan. Very ambitious. And he told Tamara he'd been in the South End in the past week before. Shannon says there was an opening in Auburn, and interviews for the general manager or the operations manager are typically done at the club, or frequently done at the club where there's an opening. And we know the defendant's cell phone hit off a tower in Auburn on January 20th, within 1.4 miles of the 24-hour fitness gym there. On the 20th. Nicole died on the 27th. 24-hour doesn't keep records of those interviews, but it's logical that he interviewed for a promotion to the new Auburn gym that was opening. That interview was on the 20th. Why else would he be down there, hitting off the cell tower? Troy Wageman said, we'd both interviewed for jobs. It was near the time of Nikki's death. He couldn't remember exactly. It was before she died. And they both found out that they hadn't gotten those jobs. And the defendant was upset. Troy said, quoted the defendant, this is BS, it's politics. He swore. He was really upset. He didn't get that promotion. And so doesn't it make sense that he found out on that Friday that he didn't get that promotion? He had a long call with Nikki that night, much longer than typical for them. And I don't have it out. When you look at the phone record, you'll see it's about 10 minutes long. There are financial issues, and that great new plasma TV and sound system weren't going to be solved anytime soon, and that job would have brought a lot more money. So he's headed home, and he's upset about something different than Nikki is. And he's upset enough that he stops by Safeway and he buys liquor. And what do you see? Him in his red shirt, in his name tag. Nobody knows if that's the actual scenario. Maybe the promotion decision didn't come that day. It's one thought. I simply offer it out there as a potential. There's nothing in the instructions that tells you you have to know minute by minute what happened. We can't. But he later told Troy and Officer Binkley that there had been an argument that night, the 27th. You bet there was, and for whatever reason, it was enough to set him off, to snap him. She was furious at him. He really disliked her by then. Everything we've heard tells us that. In fact, at some level, he's probably disgusted by her. And she's accusing him, and he's feeling rejected. And one thing leads to another, and before you know it, he's pinning her down in this symmetrical way with his body and his feet and his knees and his arms holding hers. on the bed, on the floor, someplace flat, where she could get bruising on her back just from the pressure. And his hands are around her neck, and within 2 to 4 minutes, she is dead. And he has a problem on his hands. So all we've talked about in terms of timing and where he put her and how he put her there, it all falls together. And the next morning at the gym, after he's killed her and spent the night getting rid of her body, and remember, before he fell asleep while visiting Ellen and her husband Saturday night, he was so tired, probably because he'd been up all night working on this little problem. He's wearing the same clothes, he tells the police, at the gym the next day, because he didn't have time to put on new ones because he overslept. And what do you see in that picture? That's Saturday at 11:45, 5 minutes before the call, supposedly from Nicole. And what do you not see on his red shirt? On the clothes that he said he put on that he had worn the day before? There is no name tag there now, is there? He didn't have time to put on new clothes. He's in a rush. He'd just gotten rid of his wife's body. He had to drive to the south end to do it, to make it look like she was headed toward her AA meeting in Renton. Detective Pavlovich told you there's plenty of time to do that, the way he timed it, and it's well within the 67 miles on the car from the time that Nikki went to Les Schwab. And did he ditch the car that night? Who knows? Again, it's not in your instructions. It's not an issue of something that has to be proven. But there is a 6 a.m. bus that would get him from the U District to Linwood, park and ride, according to the detective, and within 1.5 miles of his condo. And he makes it home one way or another. And he's home, and the dog is whining, and the dog has to go outside. And you can imagine the panic at the delay, and the fact that he talks to the police for quite some period of time about Boomer having to poop. That was a big deal to him, and that's because it was interrupting him getting out of there and getting to work on time. It's the worst thing that could have happened to him. Hurry up, Boomer. And in his rush, despite what he told the police, he leaves Boomer out of his cage, according to Mike Bickel, who went in that morning. So he gets to work in the same clothes he wore the night before, no name tag for some reason, and
So while she's looking for that exhibit, could you update us? It's a little afternoon. I don't know whether you've got a few more minutes or whether or not.
I think it's just a few more.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. Sorry about that. So The same clothes he wore the night before, rushed to get out. That's why he put the same ones on, he told the police. No name tag. And that would be because he left it in the car. It was between the console and the driver's seat. It's magnetized. It doesn't pin to your shirt. It could easily fall off. He left it in the car when he was getting rid of his wife's body. And so he uses the same brake that he uses to make that fake phone call to put on a new name tag, which he could get in Shannon Monahan's office, which only he had access to. And remember, when he leaves the desk, he heads in the direction of that office. And this is when he returns to the front desk. Very unclear picture. This has been identified as the defendant. And what does he have on now? And what time is it? 10 minutes after that call. So he's arrested. He had told Detective Pietz on the very first day, Nicole should be wearing a cross and a bracelet, a diamond bracelet. Remember, he's had no contact with the police since February of 2006, and they don't hear about that bracelet again until they find it in his belongings because he was getting it appraised to sell it. He'd had it the whole time. And what he said about that bracelet is so telling. When he was getting the appraisal from Amber, and she held it up to her wrist, and he laughed. And he said, "Ha ha, you're wearing my dead wife's bracelet." Motive is not something that's in the instructions. It's a nice thing to have, and it makes it a heck of a lot easier for you to make a decision. But the reality is that as a jury, what you have is the evidence, and this kind of evidence, there's a reason that people like you are on this jury, and it is because there's a puzzle to be put together, and it's building it piece by piece until you get up over the hump, beyond a reasonable doubt, which is a burden we take on with great strength and pride. Of course, we should have to prove it. I would note it's not beyond all doubt, it's beyond a reasonable doubt. And when you examine everything that we know from back when it happened in 2006 to when the case finally broke open through the work of Detective Mike Mellis, who got those cell tower triangulations and managed to dig them up from 2006. That was in 2011. Sometimes it takes a long time for cases to be ready for criminal charges, and this one was ready because it's been proven. The defendant, while strangling Nicole, caused her death. The defendant, intending to kill her once he had his hands around her neck. And you remember, and he killed Nicole by that. You remember Dr. Mazrin saying it takes 2 to 4 minutes to die from being strangled. Anybody who's ever been underwater or had their air cut off knows what it feels like. 2 to 4 minutes. Let's give it 15 seconds. And imagine Nicole with his hands around her neck, squeezing the life and air and voice out of her. "15 seconds. The long search for justice in this case is over. Nicole Pietz literally lost her voice that night when the defendant put his hands around her neck and squeezed. But her voice is in this courtroom today, being broadcast by people who have heard the evidence and know the truth. Finally, after 7.5 years, the defendant's desire for control is of no importance whatsoever, because he cannot control you. He is guilty of murder in the second degree, and I ask you to convict him of that. Thank you for your attention.
We'll take our lunch recess. Officers, you may take the defendant and the defendant will leave the jury in the jury room until we get back. It's getting very crowded out there at lunch with everybody trying to get down those elevators with other jurors and with public. So please let everybody get through so that we don't start mixing the jury up with all the spectators. Have a seat.